Hello and welcome to Politics at Jack and Sam's Daily, the podcast that looks forward, not back, to the day ahead in British politics, which is probably just the best this morning given what happened to England at the Euros last night.
My name is Sam Coates of Sky News, and with me is Jack Blanchard of Politico. It's July the 15th. Keir Starmer is back from Germany. The Winners' Parade TBC, which had been penciled in government diaries for Tuesday morning, quietly being erased. And we plunge into another crucial week in Westminster, which will set the tone for months to come.
There is lots going on to look forward to this week. Parliament is still getting going with the MPs still being sworn in, but the big moment this week will come on Wednesday, of course, with the state opening of Parliament, the King's speech. King Charles himself will be reading out the first Labour programme for government in an awfully long time. We're expecting 30 plus different pieces of legislation, and we will finally get to see Keir Starmer's priorities for government.
The Prime Minister himself will launch the Strategic Defence Review on Tuesday. That's the thing that will probably see a timetable for defence spending to rise to 2.5%. So that's what he kept saying in Washington last week. And he will also host the European Political Community on Thursday at Blenheim Palace. Now, if you remember, this is the group of about 47 leaders from across the continent of Europe set up by President Macron. That one is coming home. It's only the fourth time it's met. It will meet in Britain as part handily of Keir Starmer's reset.
The EPC is coming home. We'll have to make do with that, won't we? Instead of anything more important from Europe. Okay, we've also got monthly inflation stats out on Wednesday. It's the first time we've had those figures since the election. Obviously important as Labour cross their fingers and hope for some interest rates at some point to be cut this year. And there's some interesting stuff going on at the Post Office inquiry this week as well. Ed Davey, the Lib Dem leader, now emboldened, will be struggling his way through that this week. And also Pat McFadden, Keir Starmer's campaign chief, will be appearing as well. So loads going on this week. But obviously the backdrop to it all are the events in America, which are overshadowing all news today, even England's defeat in the Euros last night. Former President Trump absolutely at the centre of the spotlight after the assassination attempt on him on Saturday night, as you would expect. And that news is going to dominate today, tomorrow, this week. Goodness knows how much longer. It feels like the whole world changed in a moment, Sam, and you can expect the discourse in Britain already started really through the weekend about political violence and the climate and what it means for the presidential race. I think that conversation is going to continue all week.
That's right. I mean, it is amazing that we're only 10 days into a Starmer government and the domestic agenda is all but absent from the headlines. Whether it's what happened with Trump or what was going on in Germany last night. Although, as much as Downing Street are trying to revive that with very awkward press notices from the Prime Minister this morning, crowing in key campaign messages into praise for the defeated England football team. But it is stuff that's going on abroad that is dominating. Do you want to just go through the top three things for today, Jack?
Yeah, I mean, clearly the Trump story is still the biggest story in town, the biggest story in the world, and the aftermath of that is going to dominate today. Keir Starmer spoke to Donald Trump on Sunday. It started a conversation here about MP safety, and we'll get into all of that. I think Keir Starmer looking ahead to the King's speech is going to be the other conversation that's really dominates the early part of this week right up until Wednesday, and you can see lots of reports in the papers this morning about what we can expect to see in that speech. We can really is taking shape now. We more or less see the parameters of what we're expecting, and we better do 2 minutes on the Tory party at the end, Sam, as I believe we're contractually obliged to do, or at least we've sort of decided we are. So we'll give you the latest on the leadership race as well. But let's start with Trump, because that's clearly the most important thing. And President Biden made an address from the Oval Office late last night, really just urging America to dial it down. You know, the way the rhetoric in that country has got completely out of control and is leading to events like this. I think everybody can recognize that problem. It's one thing calling for restraint, though. It's another thing actually getting it. So far, Donald Trump's been very restrained, I would say, in what he said about what happened on Saturday. You know, he's called for unity. He's sent messages to his supporters. The question is really for me is that going to continue? It's the Democratic National Convention kicking off this week in Milwaukee. Trump is on his way there today. We're going to see lots of him. You know, is he going to maintain a sort of calm approach to this, or is he going to morph into the sort of more of the Donald Trump that we've come to know and expect, and what are the implications of that. I think that is going to be one of the key things that everyone's going to be watching for this week, and not just Trump, but the people around Trump, the people that speak for Trump. Already there have been lots of people, trying to pin the blame for this on the other side of the argument, saying the things they say about Donald Trump have been so aggressive that it leads to this sort of thing. And I think that conversation is going to play out. It's going to be very, very interesting to watch.
There are some ripples that reflect this side of the pond. Just after 6 o'clock last night, we got a notification from Downing Street that there had been a call between the former President Trump and Keir Starmer. A little bit of me thinks that Downing Street will have been quietly satisfied that they managed to get a call with Trump so soon after what happened on Saturday night. They are keen to make clear that they will work with whoever is in the White House come November or the following January when the next president is sworn in. And so the ability to secure that is something that they would be pleased with. The nature of what we were told about the call was quite unusual. There was absolutely no agreed sort of language around the call. In other words, there was no statement about what was said. We were led to understand that the Prime Minister condemned the violence, expressed his condolences for the victims and their families, and wished the President and those injured a quick recovery. But what we were not done was told anything about how former President Trump, responded to Keir Starmer, which I thought was quite interesting. Usually there is a flavour of both sides of the conversation given to journalists, but that wasn't on hand this time.
No, but I think it's interesting to see Number 10 taking the opportunity to set this call up. As you say, they'll be very pleased it happened, but they'll also have been very pleased to have the chance, because we know Labour have been working very, very hard to try and establish links with the Trump operation through the last 3 months, as it's become increasingly clear that Donald Trump has every chance of winning this presidential election. And of course, the terrible events on Saturday, one of the sort of outcomes of that is that it's an opportunity for the Prime Minister to call Trump in a perfectly reasonable way without upsetting the Democrats, without upsetting the president. It seems like a perfectly reasonable thing to do, but it allows them to establish that contact that is so important, because I think most people's assessment of what happened on Saturday, beyond the horror of it and beyond the horrible implications for America, are it makes a Trump win even more likely. You can see how energized his supporters are by what happened. We already know how demoralized Democrat supporters are by Joe Biden's performance over recent weeks, and obviously that will make a big difference to turnout in the election potentially. And so all the more important from Keir Starmer's point of view that he has started to build that relationship with Donald Trump, and I think this weekend gave him the perfect opportunity to do that.
Because it was only 2 weeks ago that Chris Lasavita, Trump's campaign manager, one of the senior political figures, was denouncing as fake news claims that the Labour Party had been in daily contact with the Trump campaign. So I think there's been a bit of nervousness. It'll be something of a fillip, I suspect, for Karen Pierce, the now outgoing ambassador in Washington, who does have good links with the Trump campaign, just as she has good links with the Democrats. But this relationship is key. One other domestic consequence of what happened on Saturday night is, once again, and we keep coming back to this, it has put Nigel Farage, of course, a friend of Donald Trump, back in the limelight again. And almost every day I see the kind of debate sort of and the limelight coming back on Nigel Farage. It's absolutely fascinating how he might be the leader of a very, very small party in Parliament, but somehow he manages to be at the centre of attention. He did a broadcast round yesterday morning. He was very clearly laying the blame at the feet of liberal intolerance. He said that liberal intolerance that runs through the education system, through the mainstream media, is the problem here. And I think that's going to reflect some of the tone that you get on the other side of the Atlantic too. So it's unity, but unity up to a point. But also, I think Nigel Farage helped pivot the story onto MPs' safety, which clearly is a dimension of it. Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker of the House of Commons, gave an interview on Saturday night to the Telegraph, to the Sunday Telegraph, it dropped then, basically saying that MP safety keeps him awake at night. And Nigel Farage went further and said it was astonishing that members of Parliament could walk across Parliament Square and get on the London Underground. He said, "I find it astonishing that, frankly, more MPs aren't attacked. That's how unpleasant so much of the narrative is."
Yeah, and that was a conversation that was happening anyway in this country in the wake of the election campaign. Lots of MPs and candidates revealing just how toxic they found that campaign, the sorts of messages they're getting in social media, sometimes being confronted in the street. Wasn't massively commented on during the campaign, a little bit, but is now sort of becoming clear just how difficult many of them found that. And Nigel Farage makes a very reasonable point. He himself is frequently the subject of political violence. I mean, it's been sort of relatively low-key political violence, thankfully, in the main part, but, having drink thrown at you wherever you go, that sort of thing. This guy is now an elected member of the House of Commons, shouldn't be happening, and he's sort of just painting it as a slippery slope, and you can very much understand why he would feel like that. John Woodcock, who advises the government on political extremism, also speaking out in The Guardian today, making clear he's got big concerns about where this is headed. And although we feel a very long way, to me, from where America is, then we do sort of tend to follow that country's path, don't we, culturally in many ways. So I think it is a cause for concern, and you can see again, with the story this big, people look for ways to sort of domesticate the story, if you know what I mean, to talk about it in a domestic sense, and this seems like the obvious one. And so I would think there'll be loads more conversation about this.
I was very struck by the story told by Stella Creasy, Labour MP, how she was denounced as being a child killer in front of her young daughter by an anti-abortion campaigner. And that also reminded me of the videos from the campaign trail of Jonathan Ashworth, the defeated Leicester South candidate. And there were videos that he put up on social media of him filming the supporters of the candidate that beat him, filming him shouting in his face about what's going on in Israel and the Palestinian territories, which incidentally David Lammy is over in the Middle East today. But the kind of tenor of the on-the-ground campaign was quite shocking, I thought, today.
Should we look a little bit further ahead into the week? We're getting lots more detail about what's going to be in the King's speech on Wednesday. As I said before, this is a really big moment for Keir Starmer. There's been lots of debate before the election about what he would prioritise, what would the first things he wanted to be that he would want to move on. Well, on Wednesday at the State Opening Parliament, we will see without any doubt what those things are. The government will lay out 30-odd pieces of legislation they want to get through over the next 12 to 18 months, and it will give you a clear indication of where he thinks Keir Starmer thinks he can get the sort of quick wins, the things that he thinks will get the country moving again, the things he thinks need addressing first and foremost. Planning has been the one that's been long talked about, Sam, and we are told there is definitely going to be some sort of house building bill in this King's speech. Do you think that's going to be a big moment? Do you think that'll be the one that sort of grabs people's attention and gets us all talking for the rest of the year?
Well, I think the question for all of the King's speech bills is just how big are they really? So planning undoubtedly will be one of the stories that the government want you to focus on. But from week one, when we heard from Rachel Reeves, I think the question around planning is what they're doing really that big? We're told that the legislation for the King's speech is a consultation on changing planning laws to force councils to identify land needed in their area, which could be used for housing, and also changing the rules around big infrastructure projects to make it harder to object to them. But you're still basically keeping the existing planning system in check and just changing the incentives. So the question is, how big is that? And this theme of, is it that big really? I think, that's what we'll be looking to establish on Wednesday when we see the details released alongside the bills. So take workers' rights. You've got a bill that's going to ban 0-hour contracts for those that don't want to opt out of that, banning fire and rehire, ensuring rights to sick pay and parental leave from day one. But again, the question there is, we are promised an extensive consultation. How does the consultation marry up with the promises in the bill, and could the consultation yet further water down this totemic area? Look at things that they've talked about a lot. Look at just how minimal the bill will be around changing the House of Lords. That one will abolish the right of the remaining hereditary peers to sit and vote in the second chamber. But it sounds like they're not going to press ahead yet with even the mandatory retirement age of 80, which we're told needs more consultation. And as for the full-scale abolition, well, people are wondering whether that's a second-term project for the Labour Party. And then you've got the kind of things that crop up in every single king's speech or queen's speech, as it used to be, which are sort of these nitty-bitty crime bills, often drawn up in response to a particular tragedy, giving the police more powers, in this case on something like knives. Again, are the powers on knives really the problem with policing of knives and street crime? Or is this a useful thing to say on a campaign trail and you end up doing it? And these crime bills then grow and become quite complicated because they have so much in them that they struggle to get through in their original form. So there's some things to focus on Wednesday, I think.
All I would say as a sort of devil's advocate on that is that planning, if you're really introducing top-down targets on house building and telling councils this number of houses have to be built in your area come hell or high water, that is a big shift from where we've been over the last 14 years. Whether it actually delivers the houses remains to be seen. And similarly with new infrastructure, the kind of the proof of the pudding's in the eating. If they can actually turn Britain into a country that builds a big infrastructure project quickly, then that is a massive shift for this nation. As we all know, it normally takes an age and then they get cancelled halfway through anyway. But again, I'll believe it when I see it. And I don't think we'll really learn on Wednesday whether either of those things are really going to have a massive impact or not.
One very quick thing that isn't going to be in there is anything concrete on social care. There was a story over the weekend in the Times that there might be a cross-party commission on social care. That's certainly not oven ready at the moment, I'm told. There's not going to be an announcement on that anytime. It seems that there are some who are worried about that approach in government, others who want this to happen. So that remains, it appears, just one option of several as it stands. Anyway, should we look ahead to the European political community? That's the big meeting at Blenheim Palace on Thursday with the 47 European leaders. Jack, how significant is this?
Really significant. This is a gift from Rishi Sunak, a departing gift for Keir Starmer. He set this up, made a big deal of it, and then disappeared into the night. And it gives Keir Starmer a rare opportunity to host everyone who matters in Europe at one time. And normally for a new prime minister, you'd be going off on a tour around European capitals over your first weeks and months in power, legging it around, trying to get to know everybody. And happily for Keir Starmer, instead, they're all being dolloped onto his doorstep on Thursday, and he can do the rounds very quickly. And given Keir Starmer has clearly made resetting relations with the EU a priority, I think we've all been surprised by how quickly the conversation has changed on European UK relations just in the course of the last week and a half. He will take this opportunity to start serious talks, particularly about a closer working on defence. And in fact, Nick Thomas-Symonds, his point man on this stuff, is in Brussels today. So I'm going to meet Maros Sefcovic, the EU's point man on post-Brexit affairs. And that relationship, I think, is going to be very important as Britain tries to hammer out some sort of agreement with the EU on closer defence working, which I think is going to be a big story over the next few weeks. So I think all of that makes it very important for Keir Starmer, as well as the opportunity just to start building relations with some of these very important world leaders who he just hasn't got to know yet, basically.
Yes, one thing I'm watching out for, does Ursula von der Leyen actually turn up? There is some jitters that she might not. I think she might say that she's got votes. There is a little bit of concern around the place I've picked up that as it stands, Labour's proposals are broad and shallow. The sort of the question of specifically what we're asking for is a little confusing. Do they just dust down the security pact that was prepared 18 months ago? Should they go further? There is not a huge amount of appetite around Europe, given all the other challenges, for yet another round of massive negotiations with the UK. And if not that, then is anything that comes out the other end really going to make that much of a difference? All the stuff that Thomas-Symonds will be discussing in Europe today, I suspect. A quick couple of minutes on the Tories. Ian Duncan-Smith on fiery form in the Mail on Sunday yesterday, arguing that this contest for the new leader should go long. That means possibly until Christmas. Sorry, that's my cat that you can hear. And he said, he can't think of anything worse than rushing into a leadership conference. And then he had this, which I think is a stick with which he is using to beat Kemi Badenoch. He said, it's no good having a bunch of runners and riders from Rishi Sunak's cabinet who are all as guilty as anybody about getting it wrong. We need to see how they atone. I think there is a bit of a move on the right to have a pop at Kemi Badenoch, not least because she is the front runner according to some of the Tory members' polls that we've seen. But they can't even agree on long versus short. Ben Houchen, the Tees Valley mayor, was arguing for a shorter campaign. Some ex-cabinet ministers think that, just elect somebody now because there'll be another person in 18 months, anybody, because it's quite easy to get rid of the new leaders with a small Tory parliamentary party and just put in a small number of letters. So the Tories continuing pretty much as we've got used to them being in the last few years.
I would love to talk about how Kemi Badenoch is the front runner and got 26% of members' votes in a Conhome poll on Sunday, with Robert Jenrick way behind in second place. But I'd much rather talk about your cat, Sam. I mean, I feel like listeners don't realise just how large your cat is. Sam has got a cat the size of a Siberian bear. It's this enormous, fluffy monster, really friendly and lovely. But I mean, I'm actually surprised it's taken this long for the cat to intrude on our podcast conversations. It's like storming around the house, this huge beast.
Sadly, only one cat after the other one passed away in the election campaign, which was very sad. Anyway, I'm going to tell you and the cat a very quick story about the Tories, and then we'll wrap it up for today. There are lots of Tory MPs and ex-Tory MPs now trying to cash in promises they believe were made to them by the Tory whips before the election campaign. Peerages, honours, they all went in a procession to the whip's office pre-election and made their demands in return for kind of loyalty. And they were all told that they were being put on a list. And occasionally whips would get a list out of their pocket, write down the name and go, well, you're on the list now. Of course, they were basically cashing in a completely blank check. Like, their name might have been on a list, but they never checked what the list was. And now they're all going to the new Tory chief whip, Stuart Andrew, and saying, well, the last lot promised me this peerage or this honour, to be told, well, that list doesn't exist. There are a lot of very unhappy Tory MPs around at the moment because they thought they were basically promised something. They didn't really check their receipt particularly well, and now it turns out that that's disappeared into the air, and they are pissed.
The nation must be weeping for these poor defeated Tory MPs who might not get their knighthoods and damehoods and whatever other special gongs they were dreaming of. Let's leave it there, Sam. Thank you very much. Lovely to see you. I am headed back to London now, having watched the football with my dad in Manchester last night. I will see you back on home turf later.
See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.